We're recording. It's really great to have you all here in person and then also online. I'm Cheryl Horton. I'm the Estuary Program Manager with Mid-Coast Watersheds Council. Our fearless leader, Evan, our Executive Director, is traveling this week, so filling in are myself and Carrie. We're going to start with a couple of announcements tonight. So the first one is Mid-Coast is really looking to bolster our volunteer program. We do volunteer events on Fridays from 9 to 1, usually about twice a month. If anybody is interested in participating, we can get you on an email list. Carrie's the lead for those, and so I encourage you to talk with her after this event or send us an email and we'll get you hooked up with volunteer opportunities if you're interested. Oh, you want to let this person in? Oh, thanks. The other thing we wanted to, well, there's a bunch of things we'd like to mention. Next, I'm going to talk about, there's a conference this weekend, Saturday. It's called State of the Coast. It's happening at the Hatfield Marine Science Center. And we are co-hosting a session on watershed councils and estuary restoration. And so our counterparts at Sayusla and Coos Watershed will be there and speaking, and we'll be also having a moderated panel. So we invite you to come to that session if you're planning to attend that meeting. And in association with that, partners at Oregon Shores are hosting an estuary trivia night this Friday at the Tap House at Nye Creek. So if anybody's looking for something to do on Friday evening, that will be happening from 6 to 8 p.m. and it should be a lot of fun. Next, I want to mention, and I think Tyler will mention this in his talk too, but that Lincoln Soil and Water Conservation District is hiring some full-time watershed restoration technicians. If you know anyone looking for a job that's interested in working in this field, we really encourage those folks to apply. So please help spread the word. And if you're interested in finding out more about that job opportunity, please check out the Lincoln Soil and Water Conservation District website to find that posting. Okay, and then our board members wanted to make sure that we mentioned some partner meetings that are coming up. So the Mid-Coast Water Planning Partnership is having a meeting in Lincoln City on November 16th. It's open to the public. They'll have a field trip in the morning and then a hybrid meeting online and in person in the afternoon. And if you're interested in learning more about the Mid-Coast Water Planning Partnership, that's a great event to attend. And finally, coming up in January, the Yaquina Agricultural Water Quality Management Area is going to be under review. I think this happens every 2 years. And if you have questions about that, Tyler could probably answer some of them, or Paul Engelmeyer, who's on our board, wanted to make sure we got the word out about that. So those are our announcements. Anybody have any questions or anything else you want me to add? Okay, well then without further ado, I'll introduce our speakers for tonight. So first up, we have Tyler Clouse. Is that Clouse? Tyler Clouse, sorry about that. He's with Lincoln Soil and Water Conservation District and he's their Executive Director. We also have Stormi. How do you say your last name?
It's Dykes.
Dykes.
Stormi Dykes.
Nice to meet you, Stormi. She's new with
my real name.
Awesome. She's new with Oregon State Extension Master Gardener Coordinator. So we're excited to have her here. And of course, Celeste, Lebo? Lebo, okay. Oregon State Parks Natural Resources Coordinator. And I'm sorry for not checking in with you about your pronunciations ahead of time, but we're so excited to have you all here. And Tyler, please come on up and we'll get started. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Carrie, would you like questions at the end of the presentation or at the end of each presentation?
We can do the end of each person.
Okay, end of each person then. Great, thank you for that. My name is Tyler Clouse. I'm the soon-to-be Executive Director at the Lincoln Soil and Water Conservation District. Thank you. I currently manage 3.5 programs with the district. We have a noxious weeds program, a riparian restoration program. We have our water quality monitoring program, and the half is our OSD program, which we are going to go into a little bit here. The district inherited this project and program a couple years ago from the Nature Conservancy, and we're just hitting the ground running, trying to do our best. So a little bit of a discussion map. Who's the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly? I'll tell you it's not that one. But we'll talk a little bit about the butterfly. I won't get into too many details because there's a lot to cover. For those of you that are here in the room, there's an FAQ sheet in the back. It's 4 pages long. So it's a lot to digest and get through, but it's a good resource if you're really looking to dig deep into the butterfly and some of the management and that. So I'll go over a little bit of that, and then I'll go over our 2 different programs that we have at the district that we're working on to do some OSB meadow restoration and pollinator restoration. And then we'll go through some other things and talk about our partners, and I'll move on. So the first part, who's the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly? It is a threatened butterfly species that we have here on the coast. Originally, it was in Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. And currently, there's only four populations that they are known to exist. The butterfly is often mistaken for many other butterflies and can be hard to parse out. One of the key characteristics of this butterfly is that it lives in rare coastal ecosystems, with some exceptions there. Generally, they're an indicator for salt spray meadow habitat health, and they are very picky eaters, which we'll get to. If you look at that flower, don't forget it. If you see it around, if you hike on Cascade Head or south of Yachats on some of those areas, you might see that as the early blue violet. So as I said, there's only 4 populations that are currently robust enough to say that they're actually populations of this species. So we've got a couple here between Bray Point and Rock Creek. So Rock Creek, Bray Point, 1 in Northern California. This is Cascade Head up here. And the final one, as I said, it's only a salt spray meadow, but they also are seen in some of the more alpine coastal mountain areas. That's Mount Kibo, which is a good example. At the very top of Mount Kibo, the characteristic that you'll see in these butterfly habitats is that wind effect. So it's keeping the vegetation low. So we get meadows instead of trees and shrublands and salao, which likes to take over very quickly in these restoration projects. So, as I said, it's an indicator species. And if you see these tents, many of you have probably driven south of Yachats on the way to Florence and seen these tents. Those are US Fish and Wildlife Service sites where they're doing some research on the silverspot butterfly. They're really just trying to learn as much as they can. How far do they fly? How long do they stay? How long does it take for them to go through their life cycle? How much of the early blue violets do we need? And I'll get into this now. One of the reasons why, or several reasons why the butterfly is currently threatened. Well, this is a beautiful picture, and I love going here. There are a few things that I think we can point out here. The biggest one being habitat loss. So salt spray meadows are often right on the coast on those perfectly flat areas that everybody likes to build homes for obvious reasons. We all like the views. Habitat loss also is occurring because of erosion. Natural erosion is occurring, and we're getting further and further into our forest lands, and there's no longer meadows. And some of the processes that would normally occur or have occurred in the past are no longer happening to manage those lands for meadow habitat. And I think this area is a great example. Cape Foulweather, this is where it's taken from up here. That's Otter Rock for those, and Newport's all the way in the distance there. Some good examples of habitat loss here that we see even with homes, and we promote working with landowners, and I'll get into that in a bit, is turf. You'll see these big areas where it's just grass, and grass that often is failing because it's in sand, and inappropriate areas where it's not being watered, or all these different things. So habitat loss, I would say, is one of the top reasons that this butterfly is really struggling. The lack of pollinator resources and connectivity is another reason that this butterfly is struggling. It will fly up to 4 miles north and south and about half a mile from the coast. So the flight path of this butterfly is relatively large, but what, again, we're seeing is they're struggling to find late season pollinator nectar resources. So we are really trying to shore that up by having meadows that have a full bloom calendar where something is always going year round. Well, not quite year round, but during the main season, about May through October is ideal. The reliance on human land use is no longer common. I think this is one that is oftentimes overlooked. Tribal management and ecological knowledge, there were often burns that occurred in these areas for cultural purposes, religious purposes, that would promote more meadow habitat. Since that is no longer the practice, we're seeing, again, all of these meadows transition as they normally do in their life cycle into shrublands and then eventually into our forest lands. And the last one, as I was talking about, this Oregon Silverspot Butterfly is a picky eater. During the larval stage, the Silverspot Butterfly will only eat that little violet. And it is about this big, the violet. We think of violets oftentimes as kind of aggressive in the garden landscape and in, urban landscapes. I would say this violet is probably the least aggressive I've seen. It does spread, but it spreads more slowly than a lot of others and can easily get trampled on and have success issues. So I'll get into our programs a little bit. This first one is one that we inherited from the Nature Conservancy. So a little bit of the steps there, but the Safe Harbor Agreement is something that the district is working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And how it works is we help private landowners in the area of Break Point to Rock Creek and maybe a little bit outside of there, as I'll discuss in a bit in the next slide. Private landowners are eligible if they have 500 square feet up to several acres to transition into meadow habitat. Now, the program is running for 2 more years. We do anticipate continuity in this. We are starting to get some of the some momentum. And as I said, it's between Breakpoint and Rock Creek. And why, of course, as I've talked about this, we're here to support native coastal pollinator species by providing the late season pollinator forage and seed collection sites. And I haven't talked about seed collection too much. It's something we are struggling with out here on the coast. As we plant our meadows, we don't want to be getting things from the valley all the time. Those species don't have the genetic makeups to handle the salt spray atmosphere and habitat. And we just like to see those genetics here. So all of these safe harbor agreements, so far, we have been able to work with the landowners to allow us to come back every year during our maintenance and monitoring activities and harvest seed and plant material as applicable, as long as the meadow is succeeding and we're seeing that it's not gonna be detrimental to that site. So the Safe Harbor Agreement, something I will mention about it is an agreement with the federal government. So the district holds the permit, the Safe Harbor permit, and the landowner agrees to participate for 10 years. In that 10-year agreement, you allow the district, who is holding the permit for you, to come to your project, come to your property annually to monitor. Some project sites we are anticipating potentially seeing the Silverspot Butterfly. Other areas, when we come in the spring, we're going to say, great, the plants are doing well, you're sticking to the management regime, and let me know if you see anything. And we just hope for the best. I will say with this Safe Harbor program, this flow chart will take you through it. And I've been told I can't walk from the podium, so. Okay, here we go. These 2 circles here represent our different project areas. The lower circle is our Breakpoint to Rock Creek area, and the upper circle is another project that we have. So the Safe Harbor Agreement, just to walk you through it a little bit, we conduct a site visit. We talk with you about your property, what you're willing to do, kind of what your objectives are with this. We do a brainstorming meeting with myself and Sam Derenbacher, who is a biologist who works on all sorts of pollinator issues around the state, but primarily butterflies. And we draft an agreement once we're all kind of saying, okay, I want to work on this. I want to give up, in one of our properties, we've got about half an acre. And that's great. We'll put it in, we'll talk about the arrangement, and then we will get to restoring the land. Now, the caveat with this, unfortunately, we don't have the money to come and do all of the site prep, to do all of the planting, to do all of the maintenance. So the district side of this program is we provide technical assistance. We work with you to actually plan the meadow, and we work with you or your contractor, as it may be, to discuss the maintenance activities. So firstly, that's site prep, which is usually the hardest thing for establishing a meadow. getting us down to soil, getting all of the invasives out of there, and then the maintenance of that. So we work with the contractors as well to say, okay, this is going to be our annual maintenance plan. Please stick to it. We'll be here to do our monitoring every spring to make sure that you're still doing what you said you would do. The district does purchase all of our plants, all the plants used for this, from one of our partners up north, who I'll go over at the end of this. And we will help with the actual planting of the site. In some cases with this program, it's a little more flexible than our other one. We will help with site preparation as needed for different species. We also are providing educational resources to each of the landowners on what they need to look out for at their properties, because each site is different and each one has different species and weeds. And we kind of compile a small document and give it to the landowner to say, here's what to look out for, here's how to remove it. Some of them don't put them in the compost because it'll do scary things and keep going. It's a brief overview of our safe harbor program. Again, that is in Lane County, so it's south of here quite a ways. If anyone knows anybody between Breakpoint and Rock Creek, or even just south of Yachats that is interested, please get them in touch with me. This program, because of the continuity issues between the Nature Conservancy and then the district getting it, and the district having quite a bit of turnover with 3 different program managers for this, there's been some trust issues, which is understandable, a lot of turnover. So we're trying to build this back up, and we're starting to get traction. So I want to keep that momentum going. I'm going to move on now to our Lincoln SWCD OSB Habitat Corridor project. This one is something new that we decided to do, and it's in support of proposed future reintroduction at Yaquina Head, and also in support of additional pollinator resources in the Yachats area. So briefly, again, this one is almost the same, with the exception of the other project. We can work with hotels, we can work with any private landowner. Whereas this program is specific to residential landowners. So we're really trying to target smaller meadows, smaller groups, more of the urban group that the district doesn't often get to work with. And again, there is a limit to the capacity here, 500 square feet up to 1/4 of an acre to transition to OSB and pollinator meadow. We aren't going over that because the cost just gets really, really big, and we would like to have more participation across both of the regions. The program began this last spring, but actually came into fruition a year before that. And Stormi's here with us now. Stormi's really been pivotal in getting this program going. I proposed this with the Master Gardeners as something we would apply for, and I requested their help with demo gardens to show people, here's what a meadow can look like, and here's how we, take a piece of land and we transition it into a meadow. And the Master Gardeners said, okay, well, we're gonna start doing the demo meadows now, and we're gonna plant these boxes and we're gonna get plants. And I said, I'm working with the federal government and I'll get my money maybe a year from now. And it did take over a year to get we got the grant in, and then we said, okay, now we wait. And in that time, the Master Gardeners put up one demo garden in Lincoln City, which is actually out of the program area, but adjacent to Cascade Head, which is a spot where the OSB currently is. And they also are going to be adding a demo garden in Walport. The first thought was to do one in Yachats, but unfortunately that demo garden got removed and was shipped up to Walport. So as part of this, the demo garden got going. The Walport garden is still in construction, but they have already dedicated 2 12-foot raised beds to the OSB plants, which we can go back again at all of these sites and start taking plant materials to put out at other properties. And I won't go over the why, because I think we all know now why this butterfly needs all the help we can get. Our current work, we've got a couple of different projects we've been working on. The first one from Breakpoint to Rock Creek is actually in Bob Creek, which is just a little bit north of Breakpoint. And it's here at a rental property. This entire area is going to be transitioned into OSB meadow. As you can see, there's some difficulties here, right? Transitioning turf. We've got some weed species, some Crocosmia, which is a beautiful ornamental plant that is placed in gardens, but spreads by these little bulbs that are really hard to deal with and get out. So this property, we just started this year and we have our site prep done. We worked with the contractors to get things mowed, to get any of the bulbs removed. And we are going to be planting that in the next month or two with about 4,000 plugs. So the plugs are about this big, the tubes we'll have 4,000 of them going in. All of these little rocky areas are going to be removed, and there's going to be a path through the meadow for people to walk through and enjoy the butterflies. So that one I'm really excited about. There is the connection with Bob Creek, which Celeste is working on, and I've seen some new erosion control measures going in there. So I'm excited to see some of the plants that are going to be popping up now that that's going to be more protected. The other project that we're working on that I don't have a photo of, unfortunately, is the Oregon Coast Community College up in Lincoln City. We worked with them on the demo garden there with the master gardeners, and that project is about 4,500 square feet. If any of you have been there, there's the garden beds here, and then past this sign, it goes into kind of a triangle. It's just under 5,000 square feet. We went in with a team of volunteers and we conducted a class there on mini meadows for pollinators and discussed the process of transitioning this into a pollinator meadow. So some of it was identifying different plants that we want to keep there, what's on site that we actually like. What are our goals for this? One of our big goals for these demo gardens is seed collection because of, how difficult that is. So how do we plant strategically to make it so we can collect those seeds, we can get in there and also, make sure they all thrive. So a couple of weeks ago, we went out there, we had 22 volunteers show up to plant. It was 62 degrees on a Thursday night in October, and I was so happy that was the weather rather than what it is this week. Beautiful sunset. We got in a couple hundred plants, and my technicians went out there last week and finished planting the rest of those. So we've got about 16 to 1,800 plants that went in and several partners that helped us on that. So I'm pretty excited to see it grow over the next year and see what happens in the spring after the deer eat probably half of it and everything pops up.
Good job.
So as part of this partners program, we are doing a lot of outreach. For those of you that are in kind of Newport South, we've been conducting pollinator pub-paloozas. It's a fun way of saying science talks. We've held one at Wolf Tree, one Yachats Brewing, and we're planning on doing another one this winter, likely at year one. So keep your eyes out for that. The pollinator pubs focus on OSB, but also on other pollinator work that's happening on the coast. So we've had presenters from OSU Extension. Obviously, we have spoken there. We've had U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The Forest Service has spoken. So we're pretty excited about those. They're kind of a fun event for us to do. I just talked about the Mini Meadows class. That's wonderful and turned out really great. We're going to be following it up next year with the maintenance on Mini Meadows, which will be a good follow-up to that to see how the meadow's doing and get some actions there. We're continuing to work with the OSU Master Gardeners on Kids Day and the demo gardens. And we're also working with the Yaquina Head as they're planting out their meadows. They have a proposed future reintroduction of the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly, and they currently have 3 separate meadows that they're planting last week, this week. They're ongoing. So there's a lot of work happening there. I'm excited to support it with our partners program. So again, we're going to be reaching out to landowners that are within that 4 miles. But specifically the North Agate and South Agate communities, we're going to be doing a lot of outreach to provide different nectar resources. Pollinator Week is something we often go to and will continue to do. We've done it the last 2 years at different venues, and you'll likely also see us at farmers markets. Something I didn't get into too much. Lincoln Soil and Water is primarily funded by the Department of Agriculture, and we work a lot with our farmers in the area and agricultural landowners on water quality issues. So of course, we're going to keep going to those. Some future meadow restoration. This is actually one of the sites that we're going to be doing near Tokati Kluchna, building a house down there, but is trying to conserve as much as possible and really protect the resources he currently has. So this entire area kind of down here, almost to the parking lot, there's a ravine there, is going to be transitioned into meadow, OSB meadow habitat, which is really exciting. We've also got the Upper Yaquina SIA, which is actually an agricultural program through ODA that we're working on. But there are a few landowners that, on top of their riparian restoration on the creek, they're interested in doing a little bit of upland restoration. So we've got a half-acre meadow proposed in the Eddyville area that we hope the grant got submitted this week. I'm hoping that gets funded. We get to continue doing that and expanding our meadow and pollinator restoration inland, not just right on the coast. And the district is also working with Mackenzie River Trust and the Confederated Tribes of Celeste Indians on the Cape Foulweather property, where we're hoping to do some restoration work there on that very, very steep cliff, which is a beautiful property out there. I just wanted to highlight some of our conservation partners here. Obviously, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service provides us all of our funds for these projects. The Oregon Coast Zoo and Woodland Park Zoo have captive rearing programs, which are really interesting. They're, getting all these butterflies so that we can put them out in those tents. And the Nature Conservancy, Mid-Coast Watersheds Council, you all do habitat restoration and also help us with seed collection. Yaquina Head Natural Area, the future reintroduction, hopefully. Oregon Parks and Rec, and finally the lowest one, Tillamook Estuaries Partnership. They grow out all of our plants for these, so without them, we would be struggling to get all these plants in the ground. So it's wonderful to have those partners up there that are helping us, and you can have seed collection days like this with Carrie out there. I think that's all I have. Are there any questions? Yeah.
The violet is, or is it a ball?
It's a perennial. Yep.
And you mentioned Eddyville. That's way more than I have violin.
So Eddyville, we're doing, that's our hopeful expansion to target other pollinator species.
Oh, other pollinators.
Yep. We've kind of just gotten into pollinator work at the district because of the OSB, and we're finding there's a lot more interest inland from people who want to do that instead of necessarily trees or other restoration. So,
thank you.
Yeah, Fran?
Thanks, everyone. What is the safe harbor agreement?
So the safe harbor agreement is that permit that the district holds with Fish and Wildlife Service. It's a little jargony, but the long and short of it is, because we're dealing with a threatened species, there's something you have to have called an incidental take permit. So it covers you if you're in there mowing with the best intent and you mow over a butterfly. And that's the worst possible thing. And we all know that you're trying to do the best. So the permit covers any of that, where you're really trying, but something bad happens, or, anything like that. The agreement also lines out that you're going to allow us to actually be there and monitor and meet our federal requirements.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Have you considered working with the tribe to do controlled burn between them?
I would love to do controlled burn. I currently don't have the skill set. We are working with Fish and Wildlife to see about using their burn team as well. I think it's something that is not happening enough on the coast. So we're looking into it, but I think the resources aren't quite there for us. Yeah.
Roughly how far in from the ocean can you expect to find some good lab there?
Up to half a mile, although there are, let me get back here. There are a few locations, very small map. They've done an attempted reintroduction in Saddle Mountain, and then Mount Hebo is the only other one. So really about half a mile in, and then the rest is some of those headlands that we have on the, on the western side of the coastal range. Yeah.
Yeah, I see these protective structures that you've got in some of these. Do you need those in all cases when you're doing restoration?
No, not at all. So on our projects, we won't have any of those. They're specifically more so for the reintroduction sites and where they're studying, they're doing more of the research.
Okay.
So those are the other people. We're the ones who just put plants in the ground
Okay.
and hope for the best and come and monitor. But yeah, those tents are specifically for research projects. Thank you so much.
That's something.
The card up on the ground.
Stormi will welcome you to come on up and.
Oh my God, okay. Yay, all right, so, I will, hey, everyone. So it's a hard act to follow when the person that you, when the person you're following is awesome, and so Tyler is. But I really, I don't get an opportunity to really present in a beautiful setting like this. It would be more beautiful if it was daylight and we got the bay, and that would be it. But you know what? My name is Stormi Dykes, and I'm kind of wearing a dual hat today. So I am the board secretary for the Lebo County Master Gardener Association, but I'm also a new employee at the Oregon State University Extension Office, community food specialist. Kind of weird, like that I'm here, like in that capacity, but it also kind of isn't, because all of the stuff that we've been doing and what I've been doing, and I've been working with Tyler and his group, all fits together. So I have only been a Lincoln County Master Gardener the last 2 years. And the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly project was my apprentice project. It was something that came up as like, oh, hey, does someone want to take this on? And it's a threatened species. It's an important part of the pollinator community, which, as we all know, we are reading anything about pollinators and gardening and anything else. Like, that's a huge thing. They're all disappearing. The environment is not conducive to supporting the love that we need to give for these bees or butterflies or whatever else. So when I was given the opportunity to work with Tyler and his team on preservation of the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly, it was super cool. Like, what can we do? What can I do? What can our organization do? What can our community do? And there are a lot of things. So some of those things. In the demo gardens in Yachats in Lincoln City, we planted gardens. We planted gardens that would attract the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly. And there were a lot of, it was difficult to source them. You guys will find this if you're trying to like find the ways to get the plants and to source the plants. It's not that easy. You got to go to some nurseries. You got to go to some specialized sources. You've got to go to Tyler and his team for things like that to bring it to life. We can help with that. We're going to have we have some like pieces of information, so you can contact us to find out about it. But I'm kind of getting off track here. I'm kind of nervous. Like, I'm gonna be real honest, I've been done a presentation for a lot of people for a long time, and I hope you'll appreciate that. Maybe you don't, but it is a thing that's been really prominent for Oregon, for the Lincoln County Master Gardeners Association. We've had not only the planting in our Yahat's garden, which is no longer present, in our Lincoln County garden, which really is, but we have really plotted out like the plants and the things that we need to attract the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly. And it's not even like, okay, so we know, for example, that they don't travel far. So you might say like, okay, they don't travel far. They don't travel more than a few miles. Why are we doing this? Well, hey, we don't really know. We don't really know if they could travel further. If we have the plants, if we have the violet and the goldenrod and all of the other plants, what might they do? What might they do? What can our collective effort be? If everyone like plants a little bit of things, maybe that will be enough to attract something else. Maybe that will be enough to like to be a thing for people. And I think that's really, really important. And it's not mutually exclusive. Like we might plant something that is especially appealing to the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly, but it may also be appealing to other pollinators. Do you know what I mean? It's not like it's mutually exclusive. We plant something, we plant things for the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly, they don't come, but maybe something else does. Maybe something else does as a pollinator, and that's super, super important. So that's a little bit rambly, I get it. But so the OSB collaboration with the Master Gardeners of Lincoln Soil and Water Conservation District, which Tyler talked about, is super important. We're trying to like collaborate. We're trying to like find ways to as a community, find ways as a community to really find out how we're going to, you know, make this threatened species be more of a priority. I mean, I would love to hear other people's thoughts as I ramble. But I would love to know, like, does anyone else have thoughts about this? As a pollinator, as a gardener, as a person who's trying to like make things better in a complicated world. Does this make sense to you? That you would try and plant something, that you would try and you know, be an advocate for something that is, and I see a hand up here, and I'd love to hear.
Are you encouraging, well, I assume as master gardeners you are, that you're looking for homeowners to put in small plots in their yards?
Yeah, and I think Tyler could probably address that, but I think that we are looking for that. We're like kind of looking for anybody and anyone in any way to establish a presence for it. And as master gardeners, I mean, we can provide a list of plants that would be appropriate for you guys to plant in your garden to attract. But we can also have a bigger space with the safe harbor agreement to plant bigger stuff.
The master gardeners are also, they've got a plant sale, and they help on less geographically specific than we are. So they can help with a lot of different areas that maybe our programs don't cover.
I think so. I mean, we really are, it's a huge priority for us as the Master Gardener Association. Like we have resources to tell you what to plant, when resources in terms of where you can buy the thing, resources in terms of what you can do to you know, support your small plot if necessary.
You have a handout? Yeah. Okay.
And we do actually. We have a few handouts in the back. We have some like general stuff for our master gardeners, but we also have like a frequently asked questions handout that we worked on, and I say we, me. You're probably like, who is this chick? She doesn't know what she's talking about, but I presented with Tyler to answer a lot of questions, and it talks a lot about like what can we plant, what are the genesis, what can we do, where can we get it, and you can find that all on the handout that's available on the back, so that you can actually make a difference. And I think it's important to note that, like, okay, so we know that the butterfly doesn't travel a long ways, but we don't really know that any of the stuff that we're doing, any of the things that we're planting, any of the gardens that we're, you know, incorporating, it's all information that is going to help support and you know, kind of support and help the decimation of an endangered and threatened species, which that's important. And
I was just going to add to what you're saying. I think we're just trying to, you know, what I'm getting is that, you know, you're creating an entire ecosystem, and in that ecosystem, it's like having a keystone species.
Yeah,
exactly. When you restore that habitat for those keystone species, especially if you're working with native plants. And I did a lot with native plants and stuff like that in Alabama. I worked for master gardeners there. By establishing those gardens, other things come, other things that may have been eliminated that weren't there before, which any of these restoration projects where you're restoring the habitats to their original state is a very healthy thing for the environment. And people, I think it's like the monarch butterfly for years and years and years now, has been supported by master gardeners, by people now in general, because they want to bring those butterflies into their gardens with those plants, with more native plants,
right,
to restore that species. And by doing that, they're restoring other species, and you're educating a whole group of people, from little children to adults, about the value of not using pesticides and all that type of thing. So I think that's what I'm understanding, that you know, when you have a whole species like that.
Thanks for adding that context.
I think that's super awesome. Yeah. Like that's like a really, really great comment. So I'm gonna get off stage.
I'm gonna say, can we add your contact information when we post this online?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Stormi has cards in the back too. If
I do. So yeah, absolutely. Please reach out to me. I mean, if you want to be involved from a master gardener perspective, if you want to be involved from any other kind of perspective, yes, great.
Thank you so much, Stormi. Great job. Who's going to give us our last presentation of the evening?
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of knowledge out in the audience. I know Kate up there really knows a lot, so maybe you should come up here. Oh, sorry.
Just a heads up, there are brochures on both the district programs in the back as well, if you want more information on either one of those.
No. Can everybody hear me all right? I have to wear a mask. A little bit louder, is that good? Okay.
Yeah, speak loud.
Okay, I'll try to. Just go like that if you're not hearing me. So I had to show this photograph. This is from Nestucca Bay Wildlife Refuge, and to me, I just love this. So if you're familiar with that site, the refuge has been working on Oregon Silverspot Butterfly restoration for more than a decade, and they have really shown us how to do it. And there's been lots and lots of people involved in that work, but I feel like this really just captures everything, and something that Stormi and even Tyler was talking about too. We're creating these meadow habitats for these really rare species that have lost this habitat. So it's benefiting a myriad of pollinator species, but it's also benefiting us. I mean, how much joy do we get out of this and seeing this, and here's someone that's painting it. So if you can create meadows in your yard, I really encourage you to do so. So I'm going to talk about more than just the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly. Getting cut off a little bit, and I can just read that other section out for you.
You're gonna have to talk into the microphone, so.
Okay, I am. Yeah, it's right here. So, so what's been happening on our coast, as already has been mentioned before, is that habitat loss has really been happening at a rapid rate. And one of the indicator species for, when these plant communities and habitats are not doing very well are butterflies. So we're often managing for butterflies, but we're also managing for all the species that would depend on those types of habitats. So on the Oregon coast and Oregon State Parks, we're often working in this area called the coastal strand. And that includes meadow habitats, so the meadows could be on headlands, they could be on old stabilized dune habitats, they could be on mountain vaults, so Saddle Mountain and Mount Hebo. The reason that there's Oregon Silverspot Butterfly habitat up there is that the soil is so shallow and deprived of nutrients that it creates the same plant community that we would find on a coastal headland. So those plants can provide habitat for the silverspot as well. And so all of these habitats, though, have something in common. They're early seral habitats, and they require some kind of natural disturbance to keep them in that state. So before we started stabilizing our shorelines, things like blowing sand, fire, wind, salt spray, all of those things had driving disturbances in these habitats and resetting them every year. And so then there was never a chance really for woody species and soil development to happen. So it kept them in this early seral state. So there was always lots of pockets of these meadows that supported the community of invertebrates that live in those places. But now we don't have those disturbances. So when we're doing these habitat restoration projects, we're resetting it back to a point of time and creating this plant community. But anybody that's worked on this type of habitat knows that you don't just create it and then walk away, because now every year we have to keep working on that, because eventually if we do walk away, it turns into a forest. That's a natural succession of our landscapes. The early plant communities are the meadow habitats, and then shrubs will move in and you'll get a really beautiful shrub scrub thicket. And then over time, tree saplings will come in, and then it will become a mature forested habitat. So sometimes if you have a chance to look at some aerial photographs of different areas on the coast that you know, look back just 30 years and see how much more open it is. And you'll see we have a lot more forests today than we used to. So as I mentioned, butterflies are sort of like the canary in the coal mine. It's the species that we look at a lot to find out if things are in good shape or not. And these are the first four species are four species that we're actively working on in Oregon State Parks. The coastal greenish blue is a really tiny butterfly, blue, but it's got a really amazing blue color to it. And I personally have not had the opportunity to see one, which I'm very disappointed by. I tried really hard last year, but apparently when you see the blue on this butterfly, you're just like, oh wow, what is that? It strikes you. It's like a turquoise blue. It's not like our common azure blues that we often see. And this butterfly is a picky eater. So most rare butterflies are picky eaters, and that's part of what makes them so rare. But this butterfly loves a plant that is actually really, really common. It's called springbank clover, and it's a beautiful native clover. And it has the clover flowers, and I'll have a photo pretty soon, are really large. They're just this incredible purple color and a great plant, usually in sort of wet areas, could be in a dune or on the shoreline. And so there's plenty of springbank clovers. We're not really sure why this butterfly is struggling. So this is one of our research questions that we've been working with Sam Derenbacher on. Sam was mentioned by Tyler. Sam is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service lead for butterfly species on the coast. The other species is called a Mardon skipper, and it looks a little bit like a moth, but this particular butterfly is obligate plant is a fescue, sand fescue. Again, a very common plant in our coastlines still today. And then of course the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly, you've heard lots about the silver spot. And then another butterfly that we work on is called the seaside hoary elfin, a tiny brown butterfly that spends its entire life on Kinnickinnick. And the only really known population that we think we're not even sure of its status right now. We didn't find any butterflies last year. It's here on the central coast. So that's another one that we're not really sure about. Kinnickinnick, Kinnickinnick is everywhere. Kinnickinnick grows, it's at the bank, it's at the dune. It's like everywhere we go, we see Kinnickinnick. So we're not really sure why this butterfly is struggling as well. Lots of questions. And then there's also, I'll just mention another blue butterfly on the very south coast called the Ackman blue. And Ackman blues are not rare, but there's a coastal segregate of this species that we think might be unique to our area. So here's some photographs. You've seen a lot of photos of the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly. This top left photo is Sam's hand. She's holding a butterfly. So there's lots of research going on the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly. They're trying to find out how far it flies, what it needs to do best as far as finding violets. So in those tents that are out in the meadows, they're removing thatch in some, not removing thatch in others. They're putting in lots of violets in some, not so many violets in others, just trying to, all these tests to figure out what are the limiting factors that are preventing the butterfly from really succeeding. And then with the seaside hoary elfin, that bottom right-hand photograph, that's what a seaside hoary elfin looks like. And the hoary is in a reference to, you see, it kind of looks like a hoarfrost, kind of frosty color on the backs of its wings. So that's where that name comes from. Very tiny. And if you were to see this butterfly, you would see it just floating right above the Kinnickinnick. There's another butterfly that looks very similar to this, the Western pine elfin. And if that butterfly is in the same habitat, that butterfly will fly up and rest on a shore pine branch. And the seaside hoary elfin won't do that behavior. So you can kind of tell who's who when, just by their behavior. And then here's a photo of the coastal greenish blue butterfly, really similar to the butterflies you're probably, the blue, little blue butterflies that you're familiar with. And that photo underneath is the springbank clover, Trifolium wormsfieldii, a really easy plant to propagate. And that's the Mardon skipper at the top there. The only known population we have of the Mardon skipper right now is down at Lone Ranch in the Samuel Borden corridor. I don't know if anybody's ever hiked out on that Cape Corello. It's really amazing coastal prairie habitat out on that cape, and it's always an incredibly windy place, but if you have time to stop and do that trail, it's really incredible in the spring. So just to specifically jump back to the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly, so we work at Big Creek. That's one of our primary Silverspot project sites, and that's because Big Creek, so in the recovery of the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly, they have created certain sites that are called critical habitat sites. And so if those sites are not restored to suitable habitat for the butterfly, then the butterfly itself, they don't believe would be able to be fully recovered. And I mean, when I say they, I mean Fish and Wildlife Service. And so Big Creek, Rock Creek is listed as a critical habitat site. And so Oregon State Parks is really obligated to do what they can to restore habitat for the butterfly there. And our work is really focused right now in units 1 and 2. You can see the numbers, they're tiny. It's the purple and blue unit at the top there. And it's really challenging. You know, people that have been working on the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly, it's been over 2 decades, and we still have not really cracked the code on how to go into a site that's really degraded and turn it into a high functioning coastal prairie site without a lot of resources and time. Like I think the Nestucca project, they're way over $1 million in funding that they've spent just to get to where they are. And one of the reasons that site has been so successful is that it's an old dairy farm, and they've been able to just really treat it like it's an agricultural site, so they can use tractors and seed drills. And a lot of the sites that we're working at, we have to do it all by hand. So we're hiking up, you know, with our plants, and we're planting them, and it makes it a whole different ball game. That plant to the right is goldenrod, and that's the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly favorite nectar source. And the photo underneath is a silver spot caterpillar. They're very, very tiny. And Tyler, I don't think you mentioned the captive rearing program, but really the reason that the butterfly numbers are even what they are at this point is because the Oregon Zoo and the Woodland Zoo in Washington, and now there's a zoo in Northern California, have been working on a captive rearing program. And so every year they go up to Mount Hebo, which is the most stable population for the silver spot, and they'll collect some females, and they'll take the females back to the zoo, and the females will lay, you know, so many eggs, and then they'll just grow those butterflies out into pupa, and then the following year they'll be released. So Tyler mentioned we've been releasing caterpillars at Saddle Mountain, and that's been pretty successful. And of all of these sites, Saddle Mountain is the one site that doesn't really need restoration. It's such a high functioning meadow site. It's taking care of itself right now. And then they'll also release them at the Rock Creek, Big Creek area, and then at the Nestucca Wildlife Refuge is a place where they're releasing caterpillars. You can volunteer to do that if that seems really interesting to you. We could get you in touch with Sam. She's always has a call out for volunteers when we do that. And it's fun. You have to take the caterpillar very carefully and place it, find a violet and place it on the violet, and does its thing. So I'm gonna, before I go that direction, I'm gonna go back to this. So for each of these species that we're working with, there's a host of plants that the species needs to survive. And with the Oregon Silverspot Butterfly, we've done enough work on that butterfly that we know that we need 8 to 11 violets every square meter at a site. And to support 200 butterflies, we need like 70,000 violets. You know, it's like these incredible numbers that we're trying to reach. We have very specific metrics, and we have to have at least 5 nectar species in flower during the entire later blooming plants, and it's a lot to do. And then, as both Stormi and Tyler mentioned, we don't have coastal plant materials that we can just run out and buy. We've really been working hard on this. We have a coastal native seed partnership that's been trying to get seed production in play for many of these species, and the Northwest Oregon Restoration Partnership, which is part of TEP, Tillamook Estuaries Partnership. They're growing container plants, and we have a small nursery out at Beaver Creek that the Soil and Water Conservation District gets involved in. The Master Gardener program could really help with this, because these species are not too hard to grow. I mean, we're talking about pretty common plants like goldenrod and yarrow. I mentioned the spring-baked clover is really easy to grow. Even the violet's easy to grow if you can get the seed. So, if you're interested in that kind of thing and doing that kind of work, please let us know, because any little bit helps. And so the other part that I wanted to get into as well is that with these plant communities, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. Stormi. It's contagious. Right. So anyway, with the native plant materials, we're oh, okay, that's what I wanted to go. So we're struggling with getting the plant materials in order, but the other part is the connectivity. And I was really thinking about this, Stormi, when you were talking, and I think what you were trying to really get home with folks. So we know, if you're familiar with the area between Florence and Yachats, there's Bray Point, which is kind of like in the 10-mile area, if you're familiar with that community. And then where Rock Creek Campground is and Big Creek, between those areas, we know that the silver spots can fly that far because we've done mark recapture studies. So we've caught the same butterfly going back and forth between those areas. I think it's about 6 miles, even a couple times in a day. They're strong flyers, even in our coastal winds. So, but they can't fly from the Big Creek site to the Aquina site, where the next really great nectar site is. And so homeowners, you know, through the Safe Harbor program, or if you're just a gardener and you're part of the Master Gardener program, whatever, if you have a little patch of goldenrod out in your yard, even if it's in a pot, if a silver spot was cruising north and found that goldenrod, that would get them to the next goldenrod patch. And it's just a really, I mean, something that really benefits you. They're beautiful plants, but that connectivity piece is so important, because when these populations get so small, they start being impacted by genetic inbreeding. And so then, you know, mutations happen, there's negative consequences from that. And so, and that's part of what our silver spot populations are really suffering from right now. They're very fragmented. And so if we can get them, the populations, to mix with each other, if we ever really got to that place, then I think we would be in a good place of recovering the butterfly. Another habitat that we've really started to work on more, and it's all a new habitat that we haven't really delved into very specifically before. This is the coastal dune habitat. And we've done a lot of work in these areas for the Western Snowy Plover, if you're familiar with that program. And to restore habitat for western snowy plover, we have to create wide, flat beaches, which we don't really have right now because of European beach grass and all the planting that has happened. And so what we have now that's different from what we would have been there historically is we have narrow beaches and then really tall foredunes covered with beach grass. And for a snowy plover to feel comfortable setting up a nest, they need to be able to look around. I don't know how they figured this out, 100 feet around them in all directions to feel safe to put in a nest. And so we don't have beaches that are that wide in many cases. And so we've been working in dune habitat in that regard. And basically what that means is that we're going out with bulldozers and we're flattening dunes and scraping off beach grass. And amazingly, the plovers will jump right in and start nesting at those sites. So that's been great. But we also know that we have a lot of really rare plant species that are in dune habitats. And so as we start to work with those species, we want to start first by asking ourselves, well, what are the key pollinator species that are in these dune habitats? And we really don't have much information about that. There is the Oregon Bee Project that several folks were involved with, and there's a fellow that has done a lot of work down in the Lamphere Dune. Is anybody familiar with the Lamphere Dune? Boy, if you have a chance, down in Arcata in the Humboldt Bay area, there's a place called the Lamphere Dunes, and it's the most intact dune community that you'll be able to visit. And there's a woman, Andrea Pickert, that's been working with Fish and Wildlife Service for her entire career down there. And she is just year after year has had a team of volunteers keeping this vast area free of weeds. And so it's just hummock after hummock of native dune species. So if you can go down there in the spring and see it, it's a really, really beautiful place. And the other part about the Humboldt area is that they still have a lot of the dune processes that are intact down there. So the community gets those natural disturbances that it needs, and our systems are really different than that. So what we're asking is like, okay, so when we see these really intact communities, what pollinator species are driving that? Because a lot of rare species are rare because they're having trouble reproducing, right? Their seed isn't being set. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe they're not getting the pollination that they need. Maybe they're not getting the right disturbance that they need to reset. And so we've organized, we have an Oregon Dunes Restoration, or Oregon Coastal Dune Habitat Partnership. That's Oregon Coastal Dune Partnership. Sorry, that's what it is. All these partnership names. So we've gathered some folks together and we've put together a couple of grant applications to try to get some funding to start from the beginning. So the first part of the project would be to bring folks out to experts in the field of invertebrates and pollinators to first do a pollinator assessment of the dune habitats on the Oregon coast and different places where we still have key habitat. And then from that, do a really thorough assessment of the plant communities in those areas. And then from that, once we know what are the key species that are really driving those native plant communities, how do we grow those species? Then how do we establish them on the landscape? And then how do we really implement restoration on a large scale? And that would include how do we get rid of European beach grass at the same time. So I think this is a little bit new. Usually when we're doing habitat restoration, we're starting the work in the middle. It's like, okay, we've got a species that needs flat ground. Let's make flat ground. And in this way, we're really trying to start really farther back and learn as much as we can about the habitat. And then from that, once we have that information, start moving forward in a more informed way as we start restoring the habitats. And this photo that I have over on the right, this is Silvery Facilia. This is a rare species that was recently listed on the Oregon coast, and it lives in sandy areas. And look at that exquisite moth. I was at this really great place called Storm Ranch. It's New River, it's just south of Bandon, another really intact native plant community dune system. And Silvery Facilia was there, and if you're familiar with yellow sand verbena, some other showy dune species, those were all around me, but everybody was on the Silvery Facilia, including this orange slender wasp. So that was really neat to see. So what else is out there? We don't know. We're hoping to get more information. A lot of people too think that moths are a really important part of the dune system. And there's a person named Dana Ross that does a lot of our butterfly work, really in Western Oregon. He's the lead lepidopterist that we're all using and hiring to do survey work. And we're hoping to get Dana out to do moth surveys. And that was really it. I don't know. Tyler, is there anything that I missed that I think I should touch on? Does anybody have any questions, curiosities?
We had one from online. Someone lives east of Lebo, and they said it seems like there were more swallowtails around than usual this summer. Are they in good shape or struggle for habitat like the silver spot?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was whether or not swallowtails or their populations are decreasing or not. And it seemed like this person thought it was a good year this year, which is actually, it was a really tough butterfly year for the rare species. So it's great to hear that the swallowtails were doing well. And generally, the swallowtails, I think, are doing well. There are a long list of petitions for listing different species that are not doing well. And so we don't really have a handle on how all species are doing unless it's listed and then somebody starts to study it and we really have accurate numbers. So we're really just going by our memory and our observations. But swallowtails are one of the most common species that I run into a lot. So, and they like the carrot family. So two species that we have that those species that the swallowtails would like would be the sea watch, Angelica lucida and Angelica hendersonii. I often see the swallowtails on them. And then cow parsnip is another plant that they really love. So those big white umbel flowers are where the swallowtails hang out. Any other questions? Plant goldenrod.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And those are really great, informative presentations. Celeste, I definitely want to talk to you about growing native pollinators at home, and hopefully other people in our community might like to do that too. So yeah, feel free to pop up and stretch your legs. We'll start our board meeting in a few minutes, and make sure you connect with people you want to connect with.